Okay, so let's jump into the source sheets. We are, if you turn the page over, we are up to Ois Dalid. So it's just the next page in the booklet. If you see page Mem Tes, Ois Dalid. And here we're going to return to a topic that we've discussed here and there, right? As we try to portray what it means to come into the space of hisbodedus just as us, right? As we are. We spoke about the Chacham and the Tam, right? And saying Zema Seshaloi, Zema Seshali, this is his thing, this is my thing, right? Why should we speak about somebody else? Right? Just to focus on who we are and what we have. And to come into the presence of Hashem without focusing on anything else, without like cleaning up the dining room, we said. Just to come, as we are and to speak to Hashem. Just out of curiosity, I'm just curious, like how many of you have tried to do this? Just curious this week. Yeah, in this way. Yeah? Okay. Just started. Good. No, I don't mean this week. I mean last week. I mean since, yeah? Okay, so you feel it. You feel what that is. It's an incredible thing. Incredible thing. That's the main thing. It shouldn't just be the learning of it. It should be, we have to do it. We have to do it. But I know that this has helped me, so that's why I'm comfortable sharing it, because hopefully it can help us as well. So in that context, the point that keeps on coming up that we've spoken about is the idea. We have source sheets over here if you want to grab one. We've been speaking about where does Cheshbon Hanefesh fit in, right? Because that's more of like the sort of hashkafa and the derech that most of us have been brought up with, is self-assessment and focusing on the things that we need to work on and things that need to improve, and to constantly be in a state of self-critique almost, and assessment to figure out where I'm at and where am I supposed to get it. Like, how does this fit in with just being fundamentally okay? So we presented a little bit in the past about Rotzev Shoiv, about this concept of running and returning, and about how both exist at one time, right? And here we're speaking about the Shov aspect of recognizing that as we are, we're okay, and that doesn't take away from the fact that there's also the aspect of striving. And we spoke about Yira comes first, and then Ava, but really there has to be a fundamental base level of Ava even before Yira. All this is what we've spoken about in the past. Now he wants to address it a little bit more head on. And he says some really, really what I found to be fascinating things here. Take a look at Ois Dalid and let's read inside together. And the tzaddik begins. In the context of everything we've been speaking about, Yesh leva'er, or levarer, v'ledayek b'musik Cheshbon Hanefesh. We have to speak about, okay, so there's this thing called Cheshbon Hanefesh. But what does it actually mean? What is Cheshbon Hanefesh? Right, so the way that we were brought up, how would you translate it if you had to translate it? Cheshbon Hanefesh? Accounting, yes, accountability, or assessment, let's say. But he says, if you think about it, what is it? What is it really? Uba pasuk, and this is rooted in the pasuk that says, Halkein Yoimra HaMoishlim, those people who are saying parables, Moishlim, Bo Cheshbon, right? Come and make a Cheshbon. And Chazal darshan on this, Ala Moishlim B'Yitzram, Shedarsha Chazal, Ala Moishlim B'Yitzram, those people who are Moshel, those people who are in control of their Yitzhahara, of the lower self, they are at that level because they're constantly saying, let's assess, let's figure out how we can improve. And that's the way that they are Moshel, right? How did they come to be presiding over their Yitzhahara? Because they are Moshlim, right? Because they always came to be Moshel on themselves by being making a Cheshbon Hanefesh. So he says, he says what Cheshbon means colloquially, generally speaking, in society, in the world. When does a person make a Cheshbon? What subject in school is Cheshbon? Math, right? And that's what it means. In the general sense, it means to calculate. For example, it could go in mispar, va'od mispar, kafel mispar. If you have one number and plus another number, and then you times it by another number, haresha Cheshbon sachakol. Right? What do you have at the end? It's like a calculation of all the different numbers. You add them all up, and then you click the equal sign, and what do you get? Ha-mispar ha-sofi, the sum. Lazot yikare cheshbon. This is generally what we refer to when we speak about cheshbon. So, to people who have this definition of cheshbon, we think That's what a Cheshbon Hanefesh is. Right? Kasher Yehudi oisik b'Cheshbon Hanefesh. So what would that mean for our Cheshbon Hanefesh? It means Gam Kasher Yehudi oisik b'Cheshbon Hanefesh. Mayri b'sikum ma'asav she'asay lo asay. It's like a math equation. It's like you go through. Okay, what are the things I'm doing decent at? What are all the things that are like hitting the negative? -1, -2, -3, right? And then at the end you click equals. Like where am I holding? And that's what people think Cheshbon Hanefesh means, because they think about Cheshbon from the standpoint of like math, like making sort of like a calculation. And this that a person wants to do or hopes to do. And then a person asks Hashem, please help me balance the budget. Help me get back to zero, or help me get even plus, help me have a surplus. Says Rav Kluger, but there's another way of looking at Cheshbon Hanefesh. The Ram, however, a person should come to understand Cheshbon in Yanoi Machshava. Very simple. He says the word Cheshbon doesn't mean calculation. The root of the word is lachashov, which means to think. Cheshbon Hanefesh. Says Rav Kluger, Cheshbon Hanefesh, he machsheves hanefesh bidvekusa im kaina. A completely different thing. He says it's the way a soul thinks about itself in the context of it being a nefesh, which is a spiritual being that's rooted in the divine. That's Cheshbon Hanefesh. Soul thoughts. Very different than a human being who has this flaw and that flaw and the other flaw and comes with a calculator and makes the whole thing. That's not what it is. Cheshbon Hanefesh means thoughts from the soul. Whoa. I could have used that definition when I was in like 7th grade. Right? Thoughts from the soul, Cheshbon Hanefesh. The soul reflecting on what it means to be a soul. Cheshbon Hanefesh. The thoughts of the soul. And he says, look in the teachings of Rabbi Nachman, Sichas Ran v'Zeh Lashon. It's a sefer I've, Baruch Hashem, had the privilege of teaching now for about 4 years, I think plus. Baruch Hashem, we're over a third way through the sefer. And the tzaddik says, V'zeh Lashon, Leiv nishbar v'atzvos eina inin echad klal. A leiv nishbar, a broken heart, and atzvos, which is like depression, are not the same thing at all. Ki leiv nishbar hu b'leiv. Broken-heartedness, as the expression connotes, is in the heart. It's broken-heartedness. Aval atzvos hu bamanat chol. He says depression comes from the spleen. It's like it's from a lower part of the person. So I mean, it comes from the spleen. I don't know, maybe on some level. But he's speaking metaphysically. It comes from the lower part of the person, not from the leiv. He says depression that comes from the spleen is the other side of HaKadosh Baruch Hu soneh ota, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu hates atzvos. There's no room for atzvos in the heart and mind of a Jew. There's no room for it. We're coming now up to Purim, right? Ready in Chodesh Adar. We're going to have this event, like I said, on Sunday night. Be'ezras Hashem is all preparing us for Adar, and people leave these events like floating. They really do. It's something very special. I do, but it's very, very special. It really is. It's a big mitzvah, I think, to bring someone, because then it's not, that's a good cheshbon. that's also, you leave with a surplus. Someone else's Purim experience is all, it's all on your schus. Very special if you can. So coming up to Purim, we think about Haman, and when we think about Haman, we think about Amalek. And we recognize that Purim is not, something that we're commemorating. It's a reliving. It's like a re-experience every year on the sort of like the racetrack, on the loop of the Jewish experience. You pass through. Oh, it's this part. It's this topography. It's like, oh, it's this part of the track. Like we're on this part of the track. We're re-experiencing that energy in the same way that we experienced it the very first year, that was the very first Purim. That energy is renewed in the world. The energy of Mechias Amalek, of wiping out Amalek. And I need to know what Amalek is and what it means to wipe Amalek out. And it means many things. But one thing is very important to know, and you'll forgive me if you heard this from me already, it's just reviewing. I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the context of these shiurim, but it's just good to say again, because it's true, and true things are good to say. We live in a world of so much sheker, that if you can find something that's true, you have to say it again and again. This is a true thing. The Shari Ora is one of the early Mekubalim, a Rishon, and wrote one of the introductory Sfarim to Kabbalah, which is on safaria.org with a full translation. If anybody's interested, Shari Ora, highly recommended. Mamish, all things translated into English. It's a good translation too, with notes, and I know who wrote it. Very special. So he says, actually, we know that there are 70 nations, right? The 70 Ummos Ha'olam. And then there's Klal Yisrael, right? And there's like 70 wolves, and they're running after one sheep. And actually, he says Amalek is not one of the 70 nations. Amalek is called Reishis Goyim, Amalek. Really, there are 72 nations. There's Klal Yisrael, there's Amalek, and there's everyone else. What this means is, on a certain level, that the nations of the world are connected to many different character traits. There are 35 nations that are stemming from the side of Yishmael, coming out from Avram. There are 35 coming out from Esav, coming from Yitzchak. And each of them have their own nuanced trait as a reflection of the midos of Chesed and Gvura, respectively. And all those traits of the nations of the world can be elevated. They're going to all be elevated. And that's part of Klal Yisrael's job as we go throughout exile, to go from nation to nation and to be influenced and influence. And there's an interchange of ideas, and the contours of Klal Yisrael are shaped by our journey throughout exile. This is called Aliyas Nitzotzos, right? We take sparks from every culture and we onboard into our music and into our terminology and into our language and into our parables and into our stories. And that's what Klal Yisrael does. Klal Yisrael is the heart of the world. We reflect everything. And that's perfectly fine. That's exactly how Hashem wanted it to be all the way from the beginning. That's the idea of exile. It's dafka. It's not a punishment. It's a journey. It's supposed to be that way. Amalek needs to be wiped out entirely. Which means spiritually that Amalek, because we don't know it's a nation, I'm not killing babies, I don't know who they are, I don't know what they are. And Allah apparently doesn't want me to know who they are or what they are, and therefore it must not be such a central point in our tradition now. But Amalek still exists. Amalek is an energy that exists, and on that level it's extremely relevant. What is this midah that I need to destroy legamri? What cannot be elevated? And the sofrim say that love can be elevated. Husband and wife, friends, parents, children. Everything could be elevated in a holy way to Hashem. Anger, hatred could be elevated. A person, okay, don't hate the sinner, right? You hate the sin, but a person is supposed to ayabe Hashem sinura. A person can channel their anger for cruelty and things that aren't appropriate and things that aren't right and things that are hurting other people and the world, etc. That can be elevated. But the midah of Amalek cannot be elevated. What is Amalek's midah? You know? Connected to it, Amalek is gematria safek, despair, hopelessness. Hopelessness fundamentally cannot be elevated because it's hopeless. It has no hope. It is hopelessness. Hopelessness cannot be elevated because then it wouldn't be hopeless. Hopelessness, there's nothing you can do with it. How are you gonna elevate hopelessness to Kedusha? The whole thing of Kedusha is that you're put in this world on the premise that you can do something with your life, that you can accomplish something. Despair or depression, atzvos, which is connected to this concept, doesn't just mean to be sad. It's okay to be sad, right? But to be hopeless, can't get out of bed in the morning because there's no use, because there's no point to life. That's Amalek. That's Amalek, and that needs to be wiped out. There's no place for atzvus in a person's heart, which is of course why the Adar, which is the month that's revolving around Purim, which is the Chag that wipes out Haman, which is Amalek, is Mishenechnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha, of course, right? Because the month being the complete vanquishment, right, and the complete destruction of Haman, which is the ambassador of Amalek, produces an energy of joy. And there's much more to say about this that connects to all the different mitzvahs and Purim and everything else. You have to come Sunday night to hear a little bit more, I guess. Maybe I'll say this over Sunday night. We'll see. Sorry. You still should come, though. I don't know what Dov Bear's going to say.
Hopelessness is like from misunderstanding, surely. Surely you can work on correcting that.
Maybe. So that means that I can work on correcting the traits that are beyond, that are under the surface of the hopelessness. But hopelessness in and of itself, despair, there's no room in Avodas Hashem for despair. There's no room for it. It could be, like you're pointing out, that some of the traits that have led a person, those can be correct. We're not talking about correcting. Of course, a person can correct hopelessness. A person can remind themselves that there is hope. It's beautiful. Rabbi Nachman's whole thing, right, is that Ein Shem Yesh B'Olam Klal. We're talking about using that trait in Kedusha. How? Right? It fundamentally undercuts the premise that there's even a point to serving God there. You see, so that means Machetim Chazecher Amalek. It's nothing to do with it. You got to wipe it out. That question?
How could it even be in creation? Like how it would have an Ein Bar Hashem in it? By definition, it can't.
This is the great mystery. This is the essence of the Satan, which doesn't really exist, but it exists in as much as Hashem created some capacity, not as an independent existence, but as a force that can hide Hashem's presence. So it's only a vacuum, right? It's like darkness doesn't exist, just the vacuum of light. But from the standpoint that it could be experienced, in some sense it exists. And that's a mystery. That's a midah of Hashem. Gevura, concealment, hiding. That's the whole thing of what the Yetzer Hara is. It's the klipa, it's a shell, right? It covers over, it hides. Yeah.
Is depression and despair the same thing?
Not necessarily from the standpoint of modern terminology. People could be clinically depressed, and it has to do with chemicals in the brain. Whether or not that itself is impacted by a person's choices, a person's thoughts, the culture that we're in. Reason that's a conversation. But it could be that people need medication. We're not speaking about that. We're speaking over here of a kind of depression that is the result of hashkafas hachayim, that a person's been convinced one way or another that there's no hope for them, and that's.
So the difference between atzvus and yesh is the thoughts that lead to atzvus.
I would say it the other way around. I would say atzvus is the feelings that lead to yesh, right? Yesh is despair. Atzvus we don't translate as despair. We translate as the state of being in yesh, right? The state of having given up hope. Yesh is the giving up hope. Atzvus doesn't mean giving up hope. Rabbi Nachman links atzvus to yesh, right? So that's what he says, and we're reading this inside. He says atzvus. Let's read it again. Atzva shu me'atchol hu sitra acher. He says is literally the other side. You have to battle against this, and that's why Rabbi Nachman, who was like the tzaddik, came to counteract the energy of Amalek. Esav. We learned this morning in the Kutumran that Rabbi Nachman darshans the pasuk where Yaakov Avinu says Yeshli kol. I have lots of stuff, and what does Esav say? Yeshli rav. Rabbi Nachman said there are rabbanim of Esav. He says the Esav also has rabbanim, meaning he also has leaders. Yeshli Rav. Esav says I also have a Rav. That's what Rabbi Nachman says. He says, meaning there are teachers who are teaching the opposite stuff that the tzaddikim are teaching, pushing people into despair, give up hope. There's no purpose to life. Esav also has darshanim. Yeshli Rav. He says Alufe Esav. Esav has chieftains. Esav has, but the tzaddik. Rabbi Nachman's whole thing, and that's why mitzvah gedolah is besimcha tamid. Because you have to battle with the sitra achra. Today more than ever, people are so sad. Why are people so sad? Because people have given up. People look around the world, they say, what impact can I make? What's the point? What's the purpose? There's no hope. And the whole energy of being a Jew is the premise that actually we can make a change. That's all that it means to be a Jew. Why did the other nations not want to receive the Torah? Because they didn't believe that they could change the midah that the Torah came to counteract. It's not simply HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, come and be makabel the Torah, and they said, what does it say in the Torah? And Hashem said, don't steal. And they say, we want to steal. It's deeper than that. They didn't believe that that's even possible. They didn't believe that it's possible for them not to steal. It's in their nature to steal. And so the whole premise of Kabbalah Torah means I can change, and not only can I change personally, this whole nation can change, and not only can the whole nation change, through them changing, we can change the whole humanity. That's what it means to be a Jew. Hope, 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 and therefore joy, joy, joy. Yeah, can we go a bit further? Okay. So we'll come back to questions. So, okay, I just want to cover a little bit of ground. So he says like this, but a broken heart is very precious before Hashem. Ki leiv nishbar yakar ma'oid be'einav yisbarach. Leiv nishbar is like a whole different thing. That's a broken heart. It means a person believes that they can do it, but they feel inadequate, and they feel like they feel saddened by their inability to really do what they know that they could and should and will do. But they're frustrated. They're frustrated because they're humans and they're frustrated, and that causes a leiv nishbar, krechs. But it's very different than atzvus. It's not giving up hope. Rabbi Nachman says, atzvus hu k'moi mishu bekasav aroiges. Atzvus is like a person who's angry and he's bitter. A person is complaining to Hashem, nothing's going my way, I can't do anything, you didn't give me the circumstances I need, I was born in the wrong place, I was not saying anything bad about this particular place, but any place where a person is born, a person can complain, I was born into these circumstances, this family, and I had to go through this and that and the other. What's the premise of all that? The premise is that a person is basically saying, I can't. And if a person can't, then a person really can't, right? Meaning, if a person thinks that they can't, so how could you carry on? Like, what's the point? And that leads to this state. Avalev nishbar is a whole different thing. It's just a child who returns to the father that he knows he has an eternal relationship with, and that father would never chas v'shalom do anything to prevent that son from being able to be successful. It's just he's veered off course, and he's saddened by that. But there's still a course, and he still has what it takes to get back on course, and he still will accomplish what he needs to accomplish. A child is sorry and sad that he chose, let's say, his friends over his parents, and he didn't stand up for his parents' covet or something like that, and he feels bad about it afterwards because he realized that wasn't right. He doesn't give up hope on himself for the relationship. Says Rabbi Nachman, pretty shocking thing if you don't know about Breslov and you think Breslov is all just dancing on bands. Says Rabbi Nachman, he says, I'll tell you the ideal, this is Rabbi Nachman's ideal, is to have a broken heart the whole entire day long. It's the ideal, says the Rebbe. Achanashim ke'erkam, he really says ke'erkenu. It's really interesting that they switched the lashon. I believe in the original it's ke'erkenu. He says people like us, you can easily come from a broken heart and into depression, right? Meaning it's a very, very fine line. A very fine line. See, he says, so what we should do instead is to set aside a certain hour, let's say, in the day, which of course is synonymous, as the Breslover Mashpiyim explain, synonymous with hisbodedus. That's what it is. It's setting aside time to have a leiv nishbar, and to break your heart before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a holy way, to do a real Cheshbon Hanefesh, but a Cheshbon Nefesh, right? Meaning, first and foremost, anchoring ourselves in the realization that we are a spark of the divine, and that the relationship is unconditional, and the ava that comes before the year, that comes before the ava. You understand, right? Cheshbon Hanefesh, and that kind of Cheshbon Hanefesh can lead to leiv nishbar, but it's not atzvus. It's not the kind of Cheshbon Hanefesh that people make and then they feel terrible about themselves. It's not what we're supposed to be talking about, and we're going to explain that further in the next paragraph. But the rest of the day, a person should endeavor to try their best to be only b'simcha. Reb Nosson says that Rabbi Nachman warned the Chasidim about this many times. Try the best that you can. Focus and set a specific time to feel the leiv nishbar. Va'atzvus and the va'atzvus klal loy, never chas v'shalom, to feel this sense of hopelessness and to try to battle against this sense of hopelessness as much as you can. V'shar kol hayom yeh b'simcha, the rest of the day to be in a joyous state. Now here we go to Isay. V'kan yishal hashayil. So now the person's going to ask a very strong question. Yeah, it's probably your question. So let's just wait a second. If it's not, you'll tell me. V'kan yishal hashayil. Here a person's going to ask, Im ein makom l'saseh b'chasronos. If a person is not supposed to deal with the things that they're lacking, u'b'tchunas tova sheish la'acher ve'ein li, and the realization that other people have certain things that they've exceeded, that they've succeeded, and they've excelled, and I'm still where I'm at, and a person's not supposed to want to strive and grow, and to reflect on another person's yiur shamayim, and another person's simchas hachaim, and another person's tefillah, and another person's emunah, whatever it is, and someone else's madrega, because the way that we've been expressing it, it's going to somehow get in the way of a Jew's intimate bond with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So how can there ever be this idea of what's called in Chazal kinnas sofrim tarba chachma, that there is room to reflect on someone else and to be a little bit, in a holy way, jealous to see that someone else has progressed, and that their spiritual value sometimes are reflecting on people that you went to school with, and where are they, and where am I, and etc., on whatever level of spiritual development and growth. Sheshibchu Chazal, the Chazal praised. They said it's a good thing. V'chein amru al v'tekana Rachel ba'achaisa, that Rachel became jealous of Leah, that Leah was having the children, right? Shekina b'maseh ha'tovim. Chazal say that she was jealous of the ma'asim tovim, of the good things. Yeah, you had a question that's not... Yeah, okay, let's hear it. Yeah.
If someone is ideally supposed to be connected to Hashem throughout the day on a real level, then how is it possible to only confine the Mishpat to 1 hour? Because if someone is truly connected to Hashem, wouldn't that produce the Mishpat?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily, because if a person is truly connected to Hashem on the standpoint of their shorish neshama, in that place, Leiv Nishbar is not relevant, right? Because that's the place within us, that's the essence of us, which is always totally fine. And all there's room for in that place is thanking Hashem, recognizing Hashem, giving Hashem chizuk, being mechazik yourself, operating out of a high state. On the contrary, we just learned earlier today in the Sichas Ran Shir from the Tanya in Perach Vav, that the Baal Tanya says that if a person has that sad thoughts that come into their head, he says it's always the Yetzer Hara. Just push it away. Because why should sad thoughts be coming into your head? You didn't set aside time not to be sad. Where's those thoughts coming from? He said, even if those thoughts are trying to bring you close to Hashem, reject them. Out of hand. He says it's a trick from the Yetzer Hara. Now's not the time to think sad thoughts. Thank you very much. You can dismiss them. You're dismissed. And I'll deal with my stuff when I need to deal with it. Right now, I'm fine. Person can recognize, Rabbi Nachman says, and somewhere else in Likutei Moharan, later on in Likutei Moharan, the Rebbe says that people don't realize you are not your thoughts. People sometimes think that they are their thoughts. Rabbi Nachman says that you are like a person who rides a horse, and you can control where the horse goes. You can control your thinking. You don't become defined by your thinking or identified with your thinking. You are much bigger than your thinking. Now, sometimes most of us identify with our thinking, and on that level, the ani is the thinking, but that's not really what it is. That's an illusion. That's not the truth. That's the way that it looks. It's a terrible mistake. It's the Satan. That shouldn't be fortified. That should be transcended. Rabbi Nachman wanted that we should conceptualize ourselves, so to speak, as the person riding the thoughts with like what do they call, the reins, and you can direct your thoughts. You are in control of your thoughts. You are not being controlled by your thoughts. Then you're identifying on a higher level with your chaya or yechida, the essence of you. And you're not going to be bothered by different thoughts that go in. They come in, you let them go, you let them pass, you push them away. It's fine. You're allowed to do that. Not every thought, we trust our thoughts so much. Well, how do you know to trust your thoughts? Maybe you don't know where your thoughts are coming from. Maybe they're not good thoughts. How do we know if we can trust our thoughts? Most of the time we can't trust our thoughts. We know that we can't trust our thoughts most of the time, because how many times do we think that this person is thinking that about me, and this person said that about me, and this person did that, and when they said that, they meant that, and when they sent that WhatsApp message, they meant it, with a question mark, even though they didn't put any punctuation, and it could have very much be, and they clicked this emoji, and they really meant to click another emoji, etc., 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 etc. And 90% of the time is like hayavale nivras, So our thoughts are just, it's a very big thing, in life, to learn how to not to trust your thoughts so much. So yeah, you can have a sad thought, you let it go. Now's not the time. Yeah.
So if you continuously push off sad thoughts when they come up, will it just build up over time?
No, sad thoughts are good. You're allowed to have sad thoughts. Sad thoughts are real thoughts. A person is allowed to feel sad thoughts. You feel it, you recognize it, but you deal with it, and then you let it go. It's like, it's something that comes in. It's like a bird flies into your house. Okay, it should never happen. But imagine like if the most beautiful parrot or some kind of bird flow in, and you're not scared of it or anything like that, and let's say you even set it up this way. You put a little food in there, it flies in and it sits on the swinging thing and it eats from the food and it sings a little song and then it flies out the other window, And again, because we are supposed to institute a particular time every day to deal with our sadness, so then that's a nice outlet. Most people never get that outlet almost ever, And then they're like constantly just a jumble of emotions. There's a part of them that's sad, there's a part of them that's a bit happy, part of them is stam confused and no one knows what's going on. But if you set a time every day, it's the idea of therapy. Therapy is like once a week and even then it's not affordable. This is totally free. This is totally free. And it's totally free. And you go out for every single day. Rabbi Nachman wants an hour. Okay, that's a very long period of time. I think that because time's sped up so quickly because we can accomplish so much more, so now I can condense this a little bit also. Don't quote me, whoops. But I don't think, whatever it is, but I think we can accomplish, in today, it's like sort of adjusted to today's frenetic pace. Some would argue that you mean much more than an hour. Okay, whatever. But be realistic. As we say, an hour hisbodedus, maybe we'll do it once a decade. For many of us. Maybe it's something that you should try to do and you can work up to, and every person has their own schedule. 10 minutes. 10 minutes hisbodedus. Every day. Sounds simple. Not simple. Shut off your phone. Go out into nature. 10 minutes. Don't include the walking into nature to be part of the 10 minutes, because then you'll get there and you'll turn around and you'll come home. 10 minutes in the park. 10 is a little bit small. 15, 20 minutes, let's say. Every day. Amazing. Right? Amazing, yeah.
On a practical level, for hisbodedus, do you talk about what happened like during the day? And
we're gonna get to. We're just beginning. We haven't even begun. There's a 400-page sefer. That's a page 449. Now we learn something here. We apply it. Okay. The more and you do masha balach. What comes to your heart, you do. That's because hisbodedus cannot be scripted. The whole point. If we give a prescription for hisbodedus, that undermines the whole thing of hisbodedus. But we need to be sort of guided, at least generally, in terms of and that's why this is so important. But it should be totally spontaneous. It shouldn't be rigid in any way. Yeah.
Can I ask something quickly?
Yeah,
I
sure.
just didn't understand. Rabbi Nachman said the ideal state of being is to have a lev nishbar all the time.
Yeah.
Why?
I think a person who's in a state of lev nishbar automatically is in a state of emuna, because they're like sort of in constant dialogue with Hashem, and they're constantly on an emotional level, even though it could be that like sort of modern psychology would disagree, but like on a certain emotional level, they're constantly aware of their stuff, but again, see, we're assuming, you're going to see in a minute, he's going to say that in a healthy way. Again, lev nishbar doesn't mean that I'm a good for nothing. That's not that. Lev nishbar is just living with an acute sense of awareness of how much God believes in me, how much I need to accomplish, and how much I yearn to accomplish. That's what it means. It's a state of yearning. It's a state of yearning that's built on hopefulness, and it might even be synonymous with joy. Rabbi Nachman says elsewhere in Sichos Ra, and actually right before that teaching, it's in the Lameds, or maybe it's mamash around that area over here. Rabbi Nachman says that a siman for lev nishbar, an indicator that a person actually experienced lev nishbar, is that after the lev nishbar, a person feels tremendous joy. It sort of leads into each other. And emunah and humility and yearning. These are the Breslover traits, much more than dancing to techno music. Much more. Much more. A Breslover is full of ishtokakus, full of gaguim. That's a lev nishbar. Understand? But it doesn't mean sad. That's the whole point. We're trying to get out of that definition. So that I think that makes sense, right? But the Rebbe says is that you could so easily, fall from that into despair, and so you have to sort of balance it out. Okay, a lot of questions today, which is great. But let's try to move a little bit further, or else shiur is not going to know how to do hisbodedus. So I have to learn a little bit more. Okay, fine, amazing. So here we had a question, right? Mekan yishal hashayil. Chazal tell us it's a good thing to do kinnas sofrim. right? To be jealous. So how does that fit into this whole thing about being totally okay where you are as you are? So what's the value of that? Al zahamana, he says, for this I'm giving you an answer. Kinnas sofrim hine inyan ra'oi rak lazeh habari b'daitoi. He says you have to read Chazal with the realization that they were talking to healthy people. They were assuming that we were emotionally healthy. And if a person's not emotionally healthy, like half of Chazal, you have to take with a massive grain of salt, and you have to be guided by a person who's able to say, this is just not applicable for you right now. It's not. Because most of the people are at the bracha of Hashivenu when they really should be at the bracha of Rafeinu. Most of the stuff that we think are Hashivenu stuff are actually Rafeinu stuff. We're not healthy. We're not healthy. Chazal were speaking to people with a healthy sense of confidence, with a healthy sense of self, with clarity hashkafically, with an understanding of what it means to be a Jew and what our mission is in the world and what this world really is. And people who had a direct open channel connecting their lower self to their higher self and a direct dialogue with their inner child, and mamash the way that things are supposed to be, the way that after maybe years of therapy and some breath work and meditation and everything else, maybe people can get back to that a little bit. Chazal were speaking pre-Holocaust, pre-Inquisition, pre-pogroms, we've been through stuff. We've been through stuff, you understand? And again, it's not little me saying this, I would never say it because it's a radical thing. Rav Kluger says it. You want to have a problem with it, you take it up with him, not with me. I'm just the messenger. But this, I'm saying read it, is what he says. Al-Zama Anesh, kinnas sofrim, this thing that Chazal say, that the jealousy of other people brings chachma, hine inyan, rak, or ra'oi, this is only fitting rak, lezeh habari b'daita, to an emotionally healthy person. A person hamakir es tchunaisav, a person who recognizes their talents and their capabilities, heitev, really well. V'yodeas ma'aloisav, and a person who knows their own value. And will never, ever sacrifice it, even if you promise them that they're going to become identical to the most successful person that they can imagine. They would never, ever give up 1 inch of their own territory. Because they have their own thing, they have their own special nakuda that they came to the world to do, and they would never even dream of foregoing that. They want to be them. Everybody in our generation wants to be everybody else. Imagine if you had a person who really loves themselves, really valued themselves, really wanted to be them, and wouldn't want to trade that away for anything in the world. That kind of person has the strength to look at something that someone else accomplished with that person's talents and abilities, and can learn from that person how to onboard that midah. Biram, however, and this is really important caveat, al pi erka shaloi shalamakana hanachon v'al bitchunas of shaloi, only in accordance with that person's own temperament, with that person's own personality. So it's not an aspect of becoming jealous of someone that I want to be like them. You don't want to be like them. You see something valuable, a good midah that someone else has, I wish I could onboard that and figure out a way to get that in my life. But that's a healthy person. Otherwise, what you end up having is that's not kinnas sofrim tarba chacha, kinnas sofrim, tarba atzvus. Tarba atzvus. But he says, if a person is going to make this mistake of thinking that we're supposed to be jealous of other people, that should cause a person to look at the other person and then look at themselves and say, oh, I'm a nothing, and look at me, I wish I could be that person, I wish I could be that person. No way. And the person loses their awareness of their own personal value as I ein makam lekinazu. He says this is not what Chazal intended. Umafsid b'kach eschayv. Such a person loses their life. Such a person loses their living from this. And that's not what Chazal meant. And he says, Daik, he says, think carefully. What does the pasuk mean on a literal level? Rachel was jealous of Leah. That's what it means on a simple level. But he says, you know what Chazal say that it means? Shaloi hayazeh kinah ba. Chazal tell us this doesn't mean that Rachel was jealous of Leah. Ella b'maseha ha'tovim. Which is very, very clear. Chazal are telling us she wasn't jealous of Leah. She was jealous of Leah's good deeds. Meaning, if you think about this, Rachel didn't want to be Leah. That's what Chazal are coming to correct. Because you might think, if you read the pasuk, that Rachel was jealous of Leah. Wow, she didn't want to be Rachel anymore. She wanted to be Leah. And Chazal said, no. No, she was jealous of Maseh HaToivim. She wanted to be Rachel, and if she's able to onboard the midos tovos of Leah, Toivim anayim. Ki im kina ketzat tisagel gam hi maaseh toivim, maasim toivim. Right, how she could also acquire some of Leah's good traits, Ella ba'ofanim uvekelim shalah. But in her own way. In her own way. This was a hugely important thing by the Baal Shem Tov. I'm sure that I told it to you in the past, but it's good to repeat also. That the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai forsook the world of business, masomatan, and he just went full time into learning. And there's a machlokes in the Gemara as to whether this is something that, let's say men should do. Right? Should they forsake this world entirely and to just devote themselves completely full time to learning? And the Gemara again brings that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai did this. And the Gemara cautions. And it says, Harba Asakar Reb Shimon v'lo also be Adam. Just letting you know, historical fact, many people tried to do, right, Reb Shimon, ostensibly what Reb Shimon did, v'lo also be Adam, and it didn't work out. Didn't work out for them. Says the Baal Shem Tov. He says there were many people who tried to do what Reb Shimon did, and it did work out for them. We have many, many examples throughout history of people who, and the Rambam brings, a person could become Sheva Levi, they decide they want to consecrate themselves for Kedusha, and they become Rabbanim, and they're supported by the community, and whatever it is, and they're able to live that exalted life. Many people. So what's this lashon of the Gemara? Harba asakripshin. Maybe it should say harba, lamad kol chayehem, ve'azavet olam ha'maisa. Maybe it should just describe, like, many people learned their whole life, sort of spell it out. Why does it say harba asakripshin? Says the Baal Shem Tov, you know why? Because the people who did what Reb Shimon did and succeeded are people who did it sincerely. Because they genuinely wanted to do that. Because that's what their neshama was telling them that they had to accomplish in this world. He says, you know who loy also be Adam it didn't work out for? The harba asu, the many people who did it, ki Reb Shimon. Because that's what Reb Shimon did. And if that's what Reb Shimon did, I want to be like Reb Shimon bar Yochai also. Says Chazal, loy also be Adam. Doesn't work that way. You got to be you, not someone else. That's what the Baal Shem Tov said. It didn't work out for them is because the Harba Asu did it, Reb Shimon, and they were trying to imitate the avodah of somebody else. They were trying to imitate somebody else's avodah. One of the things that we're missing so much today in the educational system, which I adore, but I'm also allowed to critique, is I feel a lack of empowerment for each individual to be an individual, really an individual. To find their own way. To find their own way and their own path. And really to discover the way that their neshama is yearning to serve Hashem, not the way that their Rebbe's neshama was yearning to serve Hashem, right? Which is usually not even that. It's usually the way that their Rebbe's neshama, and the Rebbe is just sort of imitating his Rebbe, was imitating his Rosh Hashiva, was imitating and imitating. Everybody's imitating. Who is the original? We're our original people. You need original people who can think for themselves and can do what their neshama is telling them, I saw somebody posted recently on one of the chats. It was some kind of article, like an answer, I think, that somebody had written to a Rosh Hashiva as to why he had a rule in his yeshiva that the Bachar are not allowed to wear colorful socks. And a thing, right? Because yeshiva bachrim, everybody has to dress black and white, and so one way they could bring a little bit color into their life is by socks, and so the kids were wearing all kinds of funky socks with different things on them, and the yeshiva says you can't. So the person asking the question wanted to know why. And I happen to agree with this answer, but I don't think that it. So the answer he gave is because what are the yeshiva bachrim trying to accomplish with this? They're trying to assert their individuality. But he said, what I'm done is that real individuality, because now you fell for the consumer trap of paying $15 for, or a pound for happy socks, because what's it called? Because they're, this is what some designer decided, and now this is the fad and this is the style. That's really individuality. On the contrary, that's the most sheepish thing you could do. I mean, you literally fell for the herd, and this is now the style. That's not called individuality. It's with the lamdanas. What the article failed to recognize is that the reason that yeshiva bachrim are looking to put on colorful socks is because clearly we're not giving them an outlet to express true individuality. So what else are they supposed to do? So this is what they think that they should expect. But if we were giving within a yeshiva, I have a dream that a yeshiva, and there are yeshivas that do this. I was privileged enough to teach in a yeshiva, Mevaseret Zion, or second Seder. That's what they did. Electives. They offered like 10, 15 different choices, and they let every bacher choose what he wanted to learn. I was teaching Hasidus, other people were teaching, tzitzis tying, I think was one of them. Some people were teaching Tanakh. Different things. Why do we have to force everybody to do exactly the same thing? And then, I'm telling you, okay, it happened to be in that yeshiva, they wore colored clothes, so that didn't matter anyway. But I think you'll have less people wearing, colored socks. Not that it's the worst thing in the world. But I think that, meaning, if people could feel a sense of self, but a real sense of self, it would change everything. We're so afraid of individuality because who knows what might happen, that we push our system onto people to prevent them from finding their own way. And you know what produces? People who are externally affiliated with some organization, the minute that they're out of it, because they come out of SEM or they come out of yeshiva, everything falls apart. Because we never empowered them to find their sense of self within ruchnius. And they never really had a connection to it, because it was just sort of like your thing, which I'm happy enough to stay within, but it doesn't cut deep. It doesn't go to a real level inside. But if a person makes Yiddishkeit their own, and we helped our children and our students figure out how to do this in yeshiva, find their own path, then their relationship with Hashem will far outlive the walls of that yeshiva and the mashgiach and everything. Because what you have today is booming yeshivas, and then I watch what happens a few years down the line. It's crazy. It's really crazy. That's so you could talk about how many people are sitting and learning. I want to know what happens 10 years down the line. How is the relationship with Hashem? Because the yeshiva is not the ideal. Part of the corrupt hashkafa is that the yeshiva becomes the pinnacle of your life, and it's all downhill from there, which is totally absurd. I'm telling you, all these hashkafic pieces are all bound together into one really, really dangerous thing that's causing an inordinate amount of pain, and is not our Masorah, because it's crippling people. It's crippling people, it is. And I say this again with all love and respect for Limud Torah and Gemara, and I do it, and I did it, and I adore the yeshivas. But anybody with eyes can see that what I'm saying is true. We need more trust. We need to trust our students more. We need to trust Yidden more. I'm telling you, it's this old thing. The more you try to control, the less it works. The more space you give, the more it works. This is a klal. This is just the way it goes. Within boundaries, within Gedarim, obviously. So that's what he's saying over here. She wasn't jealous of Leah that she wanted to be Leah. And Chazal are quick to correct it. Don't make the mistake. She wanted to be Rachel. She was jealous of Rachel's Ma'asim Tovim, that she could onboard it into her own. Right? He says, Ela ba'ifanim uvekelim shalah. Kim ein adam makir be'erech shal atzmai, because if a person, at the end of that paragraph, if a person doesn't recognize their own value, ein lo habasis lekabel tosefes tov, that person will never be able to have the foundation upon which to grow and to allow anything good to flourish on that. Right, Marsha, and he says, see the Marsha over there on the Mishnah that's quoted in the Gemara, Baba Basra, the kinnas sofrim tarba chachma, that the jealousy among scribes increases wisdom, and the Marsha says, Loy amar kinnas chachamim tarba chachma. It doesn't say the jealousy of wise people increases wisdom, which you would think it would, because tarba chachma, right? So you would speak about chachamim. That's a kinnas sofrim tarba, safaras, right? The kinnas sofrim tarba chachma. You would say kinnas chachamim tarba chachma. He says no, and the Marsha says ki amagia kvar lamalas hachacham lo yiskan mechaver. Because if a person really comes to chachma, doesn't feel any jealousy, because that person is already content in themselves. We're only talking about kinnas sofrim. Hachachma nisavas by memela. Such a person will already have wisdom. Because of yishma chacham yosef lekach, that a person who's wise will just naturally grow in their wisdom. Allah sofrim denakatheim sha'adayin lo higiu lamalas hachachamim. We use this terminology sofrim, which refers to people who haven't yet reached the level of chachamim. Young students, and then when they see that someone else is progressing and someone else is proceeding in their avodas Hashem, and they see that and they say, I want to have that also, but not that I want to be them, but I want to be me with that trait, that helps the agia lemalas hachacham mikalahabit. Kavachaymar, all the more so. When a Jew comes into the state of connection with Hashem and Yichud HaHisbodedus, intimacy with the divine, and a person starts to make this Cheshbon Hanefesh, quote unquote, the calculation of all the ways that everyone else is better than I am and I'm terrible, right? And a person says, this person has this and that person, and I'm empty and I'm nothing. You just completely ruins the vibe. You completely mafig as ikar nakuda. It's not the conversation. B'mashal, like we said earlier, in the mashal of the person who comes to visit his friend's house, and he's knocking on the door, and the friend opens the door, and then the friend is busy tidying up. Right? I'm sorry, not that mashal. The mashal earlier, with regard to the wife and the chalent, remember? Right, where he says, let's not talk about other people's chalent. That's not what this is about. I appreciate that you made chalent for me, and that relationship. Maimer Olam, and let's finish off. He says, Maimer Olam, this that the world says, Ganav hu loy hayadel lignaiv, right? What does it mean to be a thief? It's not a person who knows how to steal, Kim hagoinev b'poil, right? It's like a person who steals, that's a ganav, right? And this is what the world says. So why are they saying this? They're not because they're talking about thieves, but because it's an expression, right? A thief is not someone who thinks about stealing. A thief is a thief. So now listen to how he applies it. This is one of the most important paragraphs that we've learned so far. Lamdin v'chasid. A person who's a lamdin, a person who knows how to learn Torah. A person is called a chasid because a person's a chasid. Not a person who thinks about chasidus and a person who thinks about learning, or knows how to learn. It's what you actually are. A ganav is a ganav. It's not a person who thinks about a ganav. That's not a ganav. A ganav is someone who steals. A chassid is someone who's a chassid. Not a person who thinks about being a chassid is a chassid. Right? The kol bar das makar bekach, and everybody knows this. Shein erech li dianas gedoyler chava makir bezbeir maldarche chasidus. That it doesn't matter. You could be the biggest academic of Hasidic literature, and you could know all the different approaches of this one and that one and the other one. It's nothing. Ki aimrim li Yehudi, because they'll look at the sweet Jew and they'll say, "Listen, my sweet academic, hey chasid. Don't talk to me about chasidus. Be one, right? Because what's the point? Hey chasid. Live what you have." And the little bit that you're able to live with, right? And that's going to be much more precious than all your academia about what you should be and what you could be and what you might be and what you should be. Be it, and the little bit that you are is much more precious than all the idealizing of what you should be. Just the little bit that you could, just do that. Hey, chassid. A ganav is not someone who thinks about this, someone who steals, but in a holy way. So be a holy ganav, a holy chassid. Ma It's the same thing. A person comes before Hashem. I wish I was this. I wish I was that. I wish I didn't do that. I wish it could be that. And this one is this, and the other one has that. And this person is lacking madrigas. You know what Hashem says to such a person? Listen, Heye mashata. Be yourself. Heye masha'at. Be you. Bo lefanai im masha'ata bepoil. Just what do you do? I don't want to hear about other people right now. What do you do? Ki zeh yakar v'toiv be'enai. Hashem says, this is good and this is precious in my eyes. Yoiser mikol ma she'ena shayach achshav elecha. Much more than all the things that obviously currently are not shayach to you, because that's not where you're holding in this minute. Right, and that all these things seem to be much bigger than what you are, and that's not what I'm asking for right now. And again, Rav Kluger he's a tzaddik, like he's communicating to us, because anything we know about Hashem is through the tzaddikim. So Rav Kluger is just communicating to us, like giving us a peek behind the curtain, like what is God telling us? What should we be hearing? What should our consciousness be when we walk into hisbodedus? What does it mean, Cheshbon Hanefesh? What does it mean to be thinking soulful thoughts as Cheshbon Hanefesh, and to be reflecting on all the ways in which a healthy, emotionally healthy person is mekana in somebody else, but not that I want to be like someone else, I want to be me, but I want to take that madrega and to integrate it into my own realm, and to really live with a sense of true self-worth, and value. That's what the whole Sefer is about. That's what the whole Yiddishkeit is about. And that Yiddishkeit has somehow become the opposite of that it's something that crushes self-esteem, and it's something that makes people anxious and fearful and shameful, and Hashem Yishmar Aleinu, And we've turned it into a Masorah. Like, this is not our Masorah. Like, what are you even saying? What is our Masorah exactly, Depression? Like, what exactly is our Masorah? A lack of self-worth? And emotional dysfunction and broken relationships and people who are struggling to function because of stuff that happened to them in their youth around religious matters. That's a Masorah. That's what Hashem wants. How could that be? Hashem wants healthy people, happy people, healthy people, passionate people, connected people. That's our Masorah. That's my Masorah. I don't know. I think that's our Masorah. So a lot of important klalim that we learned tonight. I would say perhaps the most important in this realization, that not every Maimer Chazal that you read applies to you in this moment, right, necessarily, but that you have to know who Chazal was speaking to, how they were speaking to us, about what were they speaking to us, and so on. Hashem should help that we should not only learn it, but not just to think about stealing, not just to think about being a chassid, but to be it. And whatever little that we have, we should celebrate that. And that's what we should bring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with a healthy sense of self. Be'ezras Hashem. Okay, tremendous. Do we have any additional questions? Or is that it?
Can I just
Yeah, please.
clarify? When you're saying to have a broken heart or be jealous of someone else and their characters, it means like having a broken heart in order to aspire, like have that person inspire you to bring out the best
in
of
you.
your own character.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's
So
right.
it's
That's right. Yes. For example, if I see somebody else, and sometimes I have this because sometimes I'm not the most soft-spoken, and I see someone else who speaks very, very gently. I don't want to be that person. I want to be me. But I wonder if there's a way that I can learn from that and onboard it into me. And that way it doesn't make me feel bad about myself. It doesn't make me feel. I figure out how can I bring that into my own world, right? But I don't. Rachel doesn't want to be Leah. That's like an amazing thing. Chazal, it's an incredible way of reading Chazal, because the pasuk says she was jealous of Leah. Chazal said her actions. The Chazal are telling you she wanted to be Leah. I'm sorry, she wanted to be Rachel. She wanted to learn from the ways of Leah. That's how it's supposed to be.
Why did the process say that she was jealous of Leah?
Because Chazal had to come along and correct it so that we can see what it's not. So the pasuk tells us something, and then because it doesn't, the Torah doesn't exist on its own in a vacuum. It comes along with Chazal, right? So it's really it's both. And so if Chazal didn't have a pasuk like that, they wouldn't be able to, you know.
It could be she was jealous of Leah, but she was jealous of the way Leah was able to pray.
Right. Meaning, in other words, I think, right, even with Chazal's interpretation, it would still make sense on a grammatical level to say she was jealous of Leah, but she wasn't jealous of Leah. She was jealous of Leah because Leah had Ma'aseh Tovim. You know, so you can still, that's a much more straightforward approach. Thank you. You got me scared for a minute. Okay, tremendous. Thank you so much for joining.
על כל נשימה שאני